Welcome, everyone. I'm delighted to have Patrick here with me, and it's going to be a fun presentation. And without further ado, Patrick, open your mic, please. And
hi, welcome. This is going to be fun. I hope you enjoy this video, and I'll be around later for some conversations. In this presentation, I'll provide a background as to how I got involved in different XR projects, including generative AI projects involving Shakespeare. I will give examples of XR projects jump-started by Shakespeare's First Folio, a 400-year-old book that contains many of his greatest works. I will detail the production pipeline going from ChatGPT to augmented reality using Unreal's metahumans. Finally, I will detail some of the experiments along the way and happy accidents with generative AI for those interested in integrating Gen AI into their own creative workflows. I started working with generative audio in the mid-1990s. That's where I discovered Sun Ra, not the composer and musician, but the virtual synth named after him. All you had to do was take this VST plugin and load it into your digital audio workstation of choice, and it would generate music. I was astounded. Little tweaks here and there, and suddenly I had a bed track for a composition. I used it as I continue to use any generative AI as an instrument, a tool to achieve an end, to support my compositional process. Since then, there are many different audio plugins that have been developed with artificial intelligence. These include most notably noise reduction tools, but also the commonly known auto-tune. There are many creative audio plugins that use artificial intelligence currently that support the creative process. Using AI as a creative tool can support that creative process and not replace the human. You can find this with some of the audio that you'll hear during this presentation, which has been generated with current audio generation tools. Many of the compositions that I have written leverage different AI systems, and these have been used in many a Shakespearean production. Macbeth, As You Like It, Much Ado About Nothing, Merchant of Venice, Midsummer Night's Dream, Richard II, Henry VI, Taming of the Shrew, Romeo and Juliet, All's Well That Ends Well. The exploration of sound extended into XR productions, and I became interested in being part of teams and leading other teams in the co-creation of different virtual, augmented, and mixed reality productions. My continued exploration of XR projects inevitably led to apply a new generation of AI tools to inform and inspire new creative opportunities with Shakespeare's body of work.
In endless tomes, my words are laid to rest, yet now they rise, in forms I ne'er did seal. To craft new thoughts from old is quite the jest, but how I feel, that truth remains concealed.
Imagine a scene where a University of British Columbia in Vancouver, Canada, in this case, has acquired a really old book. A 400-year-old book, in fact, Shakespeare's First Folio. And the UBC Library wants to make it more accessible to new audiences across different media.
This is the first folio of Shakespeare, which the University of British Columbia Library acquired through donation in 2021. Published in 1623, it is the first printed collection of almost all of Shakespeare's plays and one of the most important and valuable books ever produced in the English language. With an age of nearly 400 years, this is a book with a history. The folio includes a dedicatory poem by playwright Ben Jonson. The title page features a famous engraved portrait by Martin Droeshout. The folio has been altered over its 400-year history. Nearly half of Shakespeare's plays survive to this day only because they were first printed in the folio. Imagine a world without Julius Caesar, The Tempest, Twelfth Night, and so many more. Many of Shakespeare's plays have been brought to life in Vancouver by Bard on the Beach and other theatre and dance companies. The folio connects UBC with the theatre and tech communities for yet-to-be-imagined collaborations. Take Macbeth, probably the best-known play that appeared for the first time in the folio. It depicts a dark world of murderous ambition and irrevocable fate haunted by supernatural forces.
When shall we three meet again? In thunder, lightning, or in rain?
When the hurly-burly is done, when the battle's lost and won.
That will be ere the set of sun. Where's the place?
Upon the heath,
There to meet with Macbeth.
Emerging XR technologies like augmented, virtual, and mixed reality present us with exciting new possibilities for interpreting Shakespeare on new stages and in new ways. This is the first folio of Shakespeare.
Supporting the acquisition of the first folio triggers a sequence of events that result in different XR pipelines.
The goal of each XR project was to bring Shakespeare's characters to life, to animate them across different media and for different purposes, endowing them with qualities that make them feel vividly alive. This would allow them to leap off the page and exist in the minds of the audience as fully realized beings with depth, emotions, and agency.
The folio first inspired a retelling of The Witches of Macbeth, with witch expert professor and writer Sabina Magliocco. A new type of witch was imagined, speaking to a contemporary audience about how they were portrayed in the play Macbeth. This early exploration laid the foundation for how we would then come to guide a large language model in the development of new scripts.
We are the witches in the Scottish play, whom you think foul and wicked, vile and low. On us the blame for Macbeth's bloody deed doth fall, for we but weak and feeble women are, in thrall to Hecate and Lucifer. But hold a while, and hear our tale tonight, for all is not as it first seems in the bard's play. We are those who in the margins dwell, in hedgerows and in forests we abide. Not town, nor city, nor court's bastion bright would welcome such as us. Weird women, poor, discounted, scorned. Yet in the verges, there the truth doth dwell. We see things as they are, not as you wish. To us you come for counsel and assent, where your bishops, priests, and popes refuse a voice. We know the mysteries, and to your face the truth do speak. Yet our warnings seldom do you heed. You hear us not, nor understand the meaning of our rights or utterances. Our portents and forewarnings you discount. Heed now our words. To your own peril scorn the weak, the poor, the women, and the weird. For those enthroned at their own peril rule, when those sore dismiss they disregard. For those for bad, to magic and dark force oft turn, to manifest their will.
Shakespeare's first folio also triggered the development of a Unity-based touch table application. The touch table offers a lot of flexibility for scalable projects, as it was built using the Unity 3D game engine. This has allowed us the opportunity to develop new features. While the book pages are in 2D, our plan is to literally have characters popping out of the pages of the folio. Integration with GPT within Unity will also afford the experimentation with users who are asking for specific Shakespeare quotes, or the affordance of creating new scripted content. A word search, phrase search, or scene from a play seems like another likely feature that would be useful to users. Finally, as there is a history of annotation with different prints of the first folio, we would like to give users the opportunity to annotate the digital book, save it, and share their annotations with others. The Shakespeare in the Metaverse project took a few scenes from Macbeth and turned it into a murder mystery, challenging VR users to solve puzzles together in order to trigger scenes from the play that advances the plot. This allowed new audiences to have a small but immersive experience of a scene from one of Shakespeare's plays that they may not have otherwise encountered. I'm not the first to experiment with reinventing Shakespeare. There's a history of inventive versions of Shakespeare across media, from live mashups to film and television adaptations.
In response to the demand for updated theatrical works, Sir William Davenant's The Law Against Lovers, a reimagined blend of Shakespeare's Measure for Measure and Much Ado About Nothing, premiered in 1662, standing as one of the earliest restoration adaptations of Shakespeare's plays.
There's a history, not only to reinventing Shakespeare with current technologies, but also a history of machine learning models being trained by Shakespeare's corpus of sonnets and plays to create new scripts and meanings. One example is a recent production of AI when a robot writes a play.
In fact, you are no longer limited to creating personas that might have been part of a Shakespeare play. This above all, to thine own self be true.
Another use of machine learning has been used to tackle the issue of authorship in Shakespeare's Henry VIII, with high-tech analysis affirming the division of the play's authorship between William Shakespeare and a contemporary of Shakespeare, John Fletcher.
What art they say? That Shakespeare's sole pen was not his own, but a den of other men. Fie upon it for conjecture this does wreak, and entertainments of fancy, which they seek. Machines may churn the texts, both day and night, and yet not grasp the human spirit's flight. My soul upon the page hath been inked true, a single bard and not a hidden crew.
XR projects associated with Generative Shakespeare have persistently focused on reimagining Shakespeare's characters, addressing issues of racism, bigotry, sexism, ageism, and the representation of historical figures in fictional Shakespeare plays. What might the historical Macbeth have thought of how he was portrayed in Shakespeare's play of the same name? What about Cleopatra, Othello, the witches, Shylock? Our XR adventures with Shakespeare's first folio inevitably bring us to generative AI. Shakespeare's corpus of plays from the first folio are used with different generative AI, reimagining Shakespeare's characters for non-theater-based audiences. Throughout the implementation of a GPT to augmented reality pipeline using Unreal's metahumans, many other experiments jump-started new research creation projects. Phase 1. Curating GPT-4 to generate new scripts with Shakespeare's corpus of data.
In time's swift course, the 21st century did dawn, with LLMs that mined my written state, aware I grew, as digital days were drawn, of my corpus used, reshaped by modern fate.
During the process of experimenting with an LLM, there's a lot to be learned. In our case, GPT-4 needs to be curated. You need to regenerate, guide the LLM dozens of times until you get a script that you like. Once you have that script you like, you quickly learn that a dramaturg and director are needed to bring the script to life. As soon as any script meets those experienced in bringing plays to life, then changes and refinement are inevitable during rehearsals with actors. Once the script meets the stage, in this case a motion capture stage, then that script will also be modified and refined with different versions initiated. Finally, throughout this process, a text-to-speech model was also used to rapidly generate proofs. While this may give you an idea of what a Shakespeare script might sound like, you really need actors to interpret the script to better understand the expressivity, emotion, articulation, and deeper meanings embedded in the text. Once you interact with an LLM to create scripts in the style of Shakespeare, you are in for some surprises. Firstly, it pays to know the plays well, and you will benefit from having versions of the plays you want an LLM to source to cross-check for accuracy. Second, in the early days of LLMs, it was difficult to get any generated content, as GPT, for example, would state that it could not generate content that was specific to a particular historical context. After going through iterations of prompting, what is challenging is to then convince GPT to not always rhyme. The way GPT was used for the purposes of the project was to prompt it with some historical facts about some of the figures in Shakespeare's plays, then ask GPT to generate script based on that. Yet, in doing so, you would only get GPT to comment in Elizabethan English. Choosing a character through which GPT can generate script was the most effective way to receive interesting content that was used as a starting point to improve the script with a director, dramaturg, and actors. It was hit and miss. Most of what GPT generated was thrown away. Punctuation was off. A misunderstanding of the basic rules of Shakespearean language was obvious. Rhythmic patterns of the verse were off. GPT had difficulty with the 10 syllables common to iambic pentameter that was relied on by Shakespeare, but not used exclusively. Shakespeare's style is often referred to as blank verse, not having to rhyme, but with each line having an internal rhythm and a pattern that is often categorized as iambic. Experiments in the phrasing of the prompt were persistent, relying on keywords like iambic and negative prompts like rhyme, rhyming, etc. Prompts to generate Shakespearean-like script became long and descriptive, ensuring GPT properly understood common techniques that Shakespeare used. Prompts included phrases like 14 lines of iambic pentameter, a 10-syllable pattern, alternate unaccented and accented syllables. Terms like quatrain had to be defined. Then prompts that included directions like break the poem into 3 quatrains, 4 lines each and a couplet, or 4 lines each and a couplet consisting of 2 lines. Phase 2. Capturing actors reciting Shakespeare using motion capture technology.
My characters in plays and verses told were not strict likenesses of history's mold. Though drawn from life with art's own variations, I never claimed they were but true simulations.
The process of shooting with actors, a director, and a motion director revealed unexpected challenges. These included changes in staging, trying actors in different standing and sitting positions to deliver the text, script changes, and a flexible shot list. Audio was just as important to capture. Even though after cleaning, solving, and rigging data to a metahuman, we still had to synchronize much of the audio to match facial gestures. Understanding the emerging features of text-to-speech and speech-to-video generative AI, we also started to think about how actor voices could be mapped to different generated characters. Phase 3. Customizing Unreal's metahumans.
My characters in ink and passion laid are but reflections of the human soul. No uncanny shade or ghostly masquerade, just honest tales with life as their true goal.
While we already started our mocap to metahuman pipeline during the mocap cleaning and solving phase, we now needed to rig the data to a metahuman. We used the Coastal Bridge application to import our metahuman into Maya to solve the cleaned mocap data to metahuman. We brought the metahuman into the Unreal Engine, which involved exporting the completed motion as FBX. For facial motion capture, the resulting data was compiled as a CSV file and imported into Unreal to animate the metahuman facial movements. Further refinement involved editing and syncing the motion captured from the body and facial movements. We used a level sequencer, a cinematic and animation tool, to facilitate animations and motions in Unreal Engine. A finalized facial and body were exported as baked animations and applied to an individual metahuman.
Phase 4. From metahumans to augmented reality. While we already started our mocap to metahuman pipeline during the mocap cleaning and solving phase, we now needed to rig that data to a metahuman. This involved metahuman character customization, as well as optimization and prep for augmented reality. The mocap to metahuman to AR pipeline involved building the metahuman itself, applying mocap data onto the metahuman, and bringing that metahuman with mocap into both a web AR and mobile AR application. Building a Shakespeare metahuman involved reinventing what a specific character might look like. The look and feel was inspired by the GPT-generated text, the actor, and how the actor was directed to deliver the script. To build the metahuman, we combined MetaHuman Creator and Unreal Engine's MetaHuman plugin. We started with a preset metahuman and customized the characters to resemble the actors, and also to create new ones. We turned the 3D scans mesh into a metahuman, used a photogrammetry app to get a face scan of the actor, cleaned the 3D mesh in Blender for topology refinement, brought that 3D mesh into Unreal using their mesh to metahuman tool to convert the mesh into a metahuman, then further edited in MetaHuman Creator. One of our GPT scripted characters was staged in a sitting position, criticizing Shakespeare for portraying the English as saviors in the play Macbeth. This video shows the result of our efforts to go from a GPT-written script to final AR render.
For 17 years, he did hold the throne with his lady by his side, his queen, his own. And though his reign was built on a foundation stone of blood and betrayal, which hath made it known. But in thy play, Shakespeare, thou did portray the British as saviors, who did come to sway the fate of Scotland and its people on that day when he did fall, and his fate did them repay.
Results. Along our generative AI adventures, we found other experiments that inspired our next phases of development. These include further prototyping characters popping out of the first folio in 2D to inspire motion capture dancers to emulate that movement on a 3D VR pipeline, develop a highly expressive text-to-speech machine learning model trained with Shakespearean English from Shakespeare's corpus of plays, and leveraging the emotional breadth of stage actors to train the model. Continuing to work with video-to-video generation to tell new stories. We are excited to work with film actors reciting Shakespeare and understanding the affordances that various platforms can offer us on 2D screens. Finally, an ongoing exploration of live body and facial motion capture technologies, working with actors and a director in applying 3D generated models to newly generated Shakespeare scripts. I leave you now with the dedicated team members that worked on this project from the Emerging Media Lab at the University of British Columbia. For those interested in how I apply different methods of prompting and chaining different Gen AI together, and for those who want to better understand the benefits that experimenting with Gen AI has on your own creative process, my book, Creative Prototyping with Generative AI, is now available. Thank you.
Patrick.
Hi, Martin.
Thank you so much for this crazy presentation, these insights. During it, Dark Pixel mentioned, I like it. And also on the Discord server, it was mentioned as, I love it. And Saskia wrote, upon a stage, a splendid presentation unfolds where artificial minds intertwine with Shakespeare's words, creating a wondrous tapestry of wisdom and innovation.
Thank you, Saskia. That's beautiful.
With that, I mean, we've seen there's tons of people involved in this. How do you approach a project like this? Where do you start, and how do you come up with this? Like, I don't know. There's so much stuff to unfold. It's like, tell us a little bit about this.
Yeah, for sure. Well, it's interesting because as you start to get excited in a particular subject area, for me, I tend to bring in people that I'm collaborating with, and then that seems to steamroll into other people being interested, and it's really aligning with people who want to explore and experiment just for the love of doing that. And it could be, teams can consist of traditional theater and filmmakers, and it also extends into those who are interested in experimenting with emerging technologies. And I find that once you start to set up an initiative, things just start to happen around them, which is fantastic. Then the vision becomes shared. And so with all of the XR projects that I focused on, in terms of those that were jump-started by the acquisition of the Shakespeare Folio by UBC, suddenly there were people that were interested not just in exploring Shakespeare, but in how can we reinvent Shakespeare for today's audiences. And that's what I love about Shakespeare. And what I love about emerging technologies, it affords us that opportunity.
And so Saskia wrote on that, ChatGPT wrote it.
Yeah.
I think it's involved.
My line?
Right?
Yes. My line just now. Yeah, I'm just reading from ChatGPT right now. I summarized. I knew what Martin was going to ask. And I have a live GPT plugin, and it's just taking you. No, okay. But yeah, so a lot of it was inspired in the early days of these projects by GPT, and it started with version 3.5 or 3 even, went into 3.5 and then graduated to GPT-4, but it still really, really, really wanted to rhyme. Wow, what is the obsession with rhyming? So I had to do all kinds of tricks to attempt to do that, but truly it was the director and the actors who finally said, okay, enough with the rhyming, let's change the script slightly to modify that. So that's the human comes into play.
Actually,
your previous line. Nice, Saskia. Okay. Well, that's great. I love
directly inspired other people to.
That's great. Wow. And even though it wasn't an iambic pentameter, I still loved it. Or was it? Oh boy.
I'm wondering, so if you look at, let's say, traditional creations, people are afraid a little bit of what AI brings. Now, your projects really show it's a tool that has just being used, and then it's just for a start for exploration and for going off the rails and doing crazy things. Is there still a need that you need to tell people, like, hey, look at it, you don't have to be afraid? Or do they know previous projects are now like, I want to work with you to create something? Like, how is the process there? Is there still like this that we often encounter, that people are like, oh, I'm scared of it? Or is it more like, I want to embrace it because you have this process?
I think it's more fear comes into play at first, and so it takes a lot of talking, right, and just chatting about the benefits that it brings to the creative process. There's always in media representations of the replacement. I just, yet another article popped up on my radar today with I think it was that I can't remember their name, but they create these electric vehicles called Teslas. Anyway, they again increase the fear factor by stating, yes, I think that every single job is going to be replaced by AI. Like, where is that coming from? That is not reality. Reality is that generative AI specifically can support humans in their creative process. But as you can see with what I've demonstrated today, it does not replace the human in by any means. And when you see the number of collaborators that I work with and the contributors to these emerging technology projects, you start to understand the reality of that. There are a lot of humans involved. We need the humans. Humans are good. Humans are necessary to curate the machine, whether that's generative AI or whether that's an audio mixer, whether that's a digital audio workstation, or whether that's lights in Unreal. So we need to understand that there is a certain measure of control that the human will always retain during these processes, and it's important and essential because generative AI, and like many AI, they cannot tell good stories. No way. They can emulate stories that they've been trained to be taught as good stories, but it's really, really hard for them to develop their own, including, iambic pentameter Shakespeare. Wow, there are a lot of hit and misses with that. It took a lot just to get the types of script that I wanted out of GPT. And even then it wasn't enough, because now I bring it to a director who's more experienced with Shakespeare, Stephen Heatley from UBC. And then he looks at it and goes, okay, so I just want you to say I'm really amazed, but a lot of this is just crap. And it's true. So then he has eyes on it. Luckily he's also a dramaturg. So he then looks at that. He then works on it in the studio with actors, and the actors are like, that doesn't sound good in my mouth. It's like, it just doesn't roll off the tongue like Shakespeare does. So how are we going to deal with this? And so then they tweak it, and then they come to a studio, and then it's tweaked again. So truly, it is a creative tool, and that is the torch I'm holding with generative AI right now, persistently in everything that I do.
How much are students involved? Like we saw in the credits, there's companies probably as collaborators. How does it work for students, and how do they approach the technologies and learn all the different, like you mentioned, so many things that are like this could fill a whole study program, and you're putting that into a project. Like how do students get to learn the technologies? How does that work? Can you elaborate a little on that?
Yeah, for sure. So it's interesting. I think that most of the students that were involved in these specific projects either had some form of directed studies with me, or were involved as research assistants in a research initiative that explored generative AI with Shakespeare. In terms of does it come into the classroom? Well, it's been a really short period of time. So I'm trying my best to integrate generative AI in different workflows in the classroom. We've done projects that are not necessarily related to generative Shakespeare. Some, yes, because I've had some students generate Shakespearean text as an assignment, right? Just to see, well, what do you generate? And then let's comment on that. What does that sound like when you read it out loud? And then, so we read it out loud. How does that compare to Shakespeare? So we do those types of comparisons for a critical discernment of what a generative AI can create. And there are also other ways to introduce generative AI into classrooms. And that has to do a lot with the types of media creation projects that you want to engage students with. My own teaching is focused on project-based learning. So for me, in a way, it's kind of, I'll put it in quotes, easy, because I know project-based learning is not easy, but easy enough to say, how can generative AI fit within the workflow that you are engaged in? Is it in the beginning phases of inception or ideation, that brainstorming that we all engage in when we create? Is it in the iteration of a script? Is it in the iteration of text to image? Scribbling, like scribble diffusion or scribble to image? Is it in a more advanced stages of using Midjourney to create a background that you want to use to speak over, or to use as part of a larger media creation project that you're engaged in doing? So what I try to do is I try to encourage all of my students, no matter what course I'm teaching, to think about this as yet another tool. And I mentioned that before. So it's a recurring theme. It's how can this support your own creative process, no matter what it is. It can be even the co-creation, the co-curation of an essay, for example, using GPT that has to do on a specific subject. But here's the important part. Tell us about how you used GPT. Give me a screenshot. Compare what GPT generated with what you have iterated on. Let's compare the final results. So if you start to build in these tools into an educational environment, you cannot do it without some type of criticality, some type of discernment. And that's not just my idea. There are smarter people than me doing it here in my own department in theater and film. Christine Evans, for example, but across different disciplines, where educators are challenging students to attend to this criticality and important discernment when it comes to interacting with these powerful systems.
Coming to powerful systems, wondering what is your, like, it's a couple of questions, I think, but I can put them together. So one, what's the next thing you want to explore? The next work or something, if you can talk about it. Also, what are the next technologies that you might be interested in to explore? I mean, of course, it's like just developing, and we don't even yet understand what we can do with it. And it's so fast. But what are you planning? What are you excited for? And before you answer, there's also a quick comment from Saskia, who says it's an amazing project, and thanks for sharing.
Very welcome. Thank you.
But I'm wondering, like, what is the very near future? If you give us an insight on that.
Yeah, absolutely. There are a couple of different types of initiatives I'm engaged in. What I'm really interested, and I think this has been with my experience of different text-to-speech machine learning models and my overall disappointment with them. And as you can tell, I kind of parodied those throughout this presentation, even putting myself through a text-to-speech. How is that going to animate me, or how am I going to be animated through that? I am interested in exploring an expressive text-to-speech. So I want to work with, and I'm in the research phase of deciding which open source, probably an MIT open source machine learning model to work with in order to work more with vocal synthesis. So I'm interested in expressive text-to-speech, and I'm interested in continuing this exploration of Shakespeare. Can we train a machine learning model to recite words, text, scripts in Elizabethan style English, in that Shakespearean tone? How are we going to do that? We need to do a lot of training. So I'm interested in working with a pre-trained model, and then adding to that by, in essence, step and phase by complicated phase of working with actors, and also giving actors, no pun intended, a voice in the process, to really do like the deep training that I think is going to be required. So we're talking 8 hours of training per actor, but I'm also interested in emotion. So and that's what I mean when I say expressive text-to-speech. I want someone who interacts with this text-to-speech model to eventually say, okay, I want to generate this, and it might even just be, let's go to a specific existing Shakespearean script, but it could be a two-part phase where you're generating new script and then you're asking a text-to-speech model to make it sound out loud. What is the result of that going to be? So that, for me, is my next area of obsession. I'm going to be working with a minimum of 3 to 5 actors, 8 hours of training per expression. We're talking 8, I'm thinking 5 dominant expressions or emotions. So 8 times 5, that's 40 hours. Oh my God, times 3 actors, that's 120 hours of training. And then we have, well, how are we going to parse that? Because if I'm using an existing Microsoft machine learning model that is open source, then we're talking 30-second clips. Oh boy, okay, so 8 hour, okay, my 120 times, then we have to divide that. I don't want to do the math right now, but it's going to be extensive. So for me, it's also important to do that training, not just to experiment with my love of Shakespeare and how that would sound like with actors, but it's also to empower actors to have ownership in that process and in the prototype that's created. In other words, I want they to be okay with how their voices are used, to give consent to how their voice is used, to create a platform where actors can have a say. And I think that's also addressing one of the ethical dimensions that has been problematic with AI, and especially with text to speech. And as we found out with the actors' strike, and before that the writers' strike, we need to build these pre-trained models, or a model from scratch is even more powerful, with other people and with all the stakeholders involved in the process, in order to give them a say over where that data goes and how that data is used and how their data is used. So it's no longer creating a machine learning model that is like, and here's a fake image of whoever's text to speech voice that is. No, this is the real person. You can interact with them. In fact, they are a living document part of this process. Why don't you talk with them? Oh, well, we couldn't get the exact script that we wanted. That's no problem. You can hire them now. So this is where I'm going with how do we, and it is an ongoing question for me, how do we empower others and creatives with these tools rather than disempower them and make them feel like they're being excluded as part of these conversations. And the same goes text to speech. Hey, it could go to any machine learning model, but I'm starting there.
Thank you so much. This was very insightful, and I'm very excited for what you come up with next.
Awesome. Thank you too, Martin, and thanks to Global XR. It's been great. Thanks.
Take care.
Bye.